you? The new number 2.
Who is number 1?
You are number 6.
I am not a number. I am a free man.
I am not a number, I am a free man. Surely the greatest words ever spoken in a cult television show. And the star of The Prisoner, Patrick McGoohan, has died after a short illness in Los Angeles. McGoohan won 2 Emmys for his work on Columbo, and more recently he appeared as King Edward Longshanks in the 1995 Mel Gibson film. He was 80 years old when he died, but of course we remember him for The Prisoner. Well, I spoke to the writer, broadcaster and prisoner expert Robert Fairclough and asked him what sort of a man Patrick McGoohan was.
A man of contradictions, really. I mean, he was born in New York, and then his family emigrated to Ireland, and he always saw himself as a bit of an outsider, I think. I mean, certainly if you place him in the context of the 60s, he was a man who completely got the Beatles and the kind of whole social revolution that was going on, and famously used the Beatles, All You Need Is Love, in the last episode. But at the same time, he was completely against the kind of free love kind of attitude of the era, and, you know, never appeared in anything really that had sort of, you know, casual sex or extreme violence or anything like that.
Did you get a chance to make contact with him at any point?
Briefly, yeah. I mean, when I was writing my first book, I faxed his agent, and not expecting a reply. And one morning the phone went, and this gruff voice said, "Is Robert there?" And I said, "Well, yes." And he said, "Oh, it's Patrick here." And I said, "Well, Patrick who?" And he said, "Patrick McGoohan." And I was kind of completely gobsmacked, because he very rarely gave interviews anyway by this stage. And he just said, "Oh, I'm just phoning to tell you I'm not doing any more interviews for the rest of my life. Be seeing you." And that was it.
Oh, no. And
so he actually, I mean, it's so typical of the man that he'd sort of tell you up that he wouldn't be doing phone you up and tell you he wasn't doing an interview.
Do you know why that was? Was he stitched up at some point in his early life?
He's, like I say, a very sort of man of contradictions, really. I mean, despite being a TV star and latterly a film star, he sort of shunned publicity, was intensely private. And even though, as you well know, the Prisoner became sort of a massive kind of cult program, he was very much against cults and the kind of hero worship that sort of goes on everywhere today. So, you know, his view was very much that, well, I've made my piece of work, it should speak for itself, and I'm not going to explain it. You know, it's there. You can go and read what you like into it.
Well, I was the right age, of course, and a total fan of all these ATV series.
Yeah.
And I watched Danger Man before The Prisoner was ever around. What was the difference in the production of Danger Man and The Prisoner? I mean, was he differently involved in the two series?
Yeah, I mean, again, if one thinks of, obviously, the most famous secret agent of the time was James Bond, you know, famous for girls and guns, and because Patrick had quite, you know, a very religious man, actually, when Danger Man started, he said, well, I'm not going to have guns, I'm not going to have a casual relationship with women in every episode. So that immediately changed the kind of nature of the show, and it had to be a bit more inventive and a bit more complex. When The Prisoner comes along, it's actually quite amazing. I mean, if you think of the terms of the 60s, you could say Danger Man was the kind of hit single, and The Prisoner was a concept album, you know. Mm-hmm. Because suddenly here's a man who's given, you know, loads of money and absolutely carte blanche to make whatever kind of series he wants. I mean, to act in it, write it, produce it, and direct it. I mean, it's absolutely unheard of. I can't think of many other people who that has actually happened to. You know,
who trusted him to that extent? Did this come right from the top? Was it Lou Grade himself?
Yeah, it was right from the top. I mean, Lou Grade ran a company called ITC, which kind of put the money into all these things like The Saint and Danger Man and you know, The Champions and things like that. And he was a great entrepreneur, was Lou, and a great believer in people. And the famous story goes that when Patrick got fed up with Danger Man, he said to Lou, well, look, you know, don't want to do any more. And Lou was like, well, what have you got? And Patrick said, well, I've got this sort of idea about this bloke. He's locked up in a weird island and he's interrogated and there's loads of, psychedelic drugs flying around or whatever. And Lou said, well, it's so crazy it might just work. And the whole thing was settled on a handshake. There was no formal contract or anything. And, it's very much in the spirit of the 60s, that amount of trust you would give someone, and just the belief in the idea. And I suppose, as the cliche goes, the rest is history,
How did he light on that very strange and wonderful Welsh setting in Portmeirion there?
Well, they did, actually, in the first years of Danger Man in the 60s, they'd, because it looked so different and could represent any part of the world, they went up there to shoot quite a lot of exterior sequences, so it could be a bit of Italy, a bit of China and so on. And Patrick just sort of filed it away in his head and thought, well, actually, as itself, it's never really been used in anything. So he sort of filed it away. And when, The Prisoner came to be made, that's obviously where they set it. The thing is, it was actually unheard of in those days to go somewhere like that for 6 weeks and film somewhere. If you think about the way television's made today, nearly all of it, certainly drama looks like a film, the way it's been shot and everything. But really, The Prisoner was, I think, and obviously colour was just coming in, it was the first thing that was done like that. If you look at them, they really do look like little cinema films for the small screen. The production values are that good and the editing's that good. And
they're so surreal, aren't they? That surrealism touch, that was all him too, wasn't it?
That was all him. Famously, the script editor and co-creator of The Prisoner, George Markstein, was much more interested in espionage and secret agents and, is it the West running it? Is it Russia running it or whatever? But Patrick was much more interested in the kind of surreal side of it, like you say, particularly in, a lot of the stuff in it at the time came from Freudian dream symbolism. A lot of it, if you read some Freud and stuff, it's very much along the lines of what he was thinking about in, the suppressed imagery you get in dreams and stuff. And that collision, really, even though towards the end they didn't get on, that's what made the program so special, because you have this secret agent story wrapped up in this kind of surreal, kind of weird, psychedelic kind of world,
Like a Magritte painting.
Like a Magritte painting, I suppose, yes.
Yeah,
very good
last of all, if we've all got these Prisoner DVDs now, did he make a lot of money out of it in the latter part of his life?
It's interesting. I think what... there's a big budget remake coming up, as you might know, starring Ian McKellen and an American actor called Jim Caviezel. But what people don't realise is actually when the time it was first shown, it was a bit, people didn't get it, and it was seen as a bit of a flop, really. It's only in subsequent years that the whole the cult's grown up around it. And the ironic thing was, in about 1974, the company that made it, Everyman Films, which was Patrick's production company, it went into administration. So, and a lot of its debts were written off. So the actual ownership of the show reverted to Lou Grade's ITC. So, but I think they came to a gentleman's agreement, and Patrick did still get some money from it. So he wasn't that daft.
Well, that was Robert Fairclough talking about the Prisoner. And there is, of course, this remake going on at the moment with Ian McKellen as number 2, who always gets the better of McGoohan's number 6. And don't ask me, Jim Caviezel, who is young, naturally. He looks, he does actually look like a bit of a throwback to McGoohan. He's wearing, of course, the black polo neck in this piece here from The Guardian in June. And he's had the hair done. He looks good. Chisel-jawed kind of character. And obviously will be suitably active. But it all depends on how well he plays off McKellen as the man who must be listened to. I must say, as I said to Robert, I was completely taken by The Prisoner. I just thought it was so fun. But I saw more of it, probably, in reruns than I did at the time. And I think it was up to Channel 4 who did most of it and gave us, what they did. So it's a great piece of work, and we have to wish the remake well, even though some of us will still be watching those old DVDs. It's just before 1:30.